Okay, so this deep dive is going to be pretty interesting. I think, you guys send us a YouTube video, and we're going to try to break down the arguments in the video with you guys and kind of see if we can understand it all together. So this video is titled, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, but #onkastet.
Right.
Bayesh Ya'an, who is the Prophet Muhammad.
Right.
And it's from the channel Kessel Gloob to Foreign Content.
Okay.
So this video is really interesting, and I think a good place to start is what's the core of the video? What are they trying to show us in this video?
Well, the video is trying to show that there may be a mention or a reference to the Prophet Muhammad in the Bible, specifically the Old Testament. And I think that's what makes this so interesting, because the video itself says that, the Quran is the authority for Muslims.
Right.
And the Bible is the authority for Christians and Jews.
Yeah.
But they're saying that maybe there is something in the Bible that refers to the Prophet Muhammad. So I think that's what makes it interesting to unpack a little.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating, because a lot of people would say that those are very separate things.
Yeah.
That the Quran is for Muslims and the Bible is for Christians and Jews.
Totally.
And never the twain shall meet. But this video is making the argument that maybe they do in a way.
Right. They're saying that they actually may meet, or that they may be connected in ways that we didn't realize or we didn't think about, and they're saying it very clearly from the beginning.
That's what kind of got us going. Like, this is something we need to look at deeper.
Yeah, and it deals with a lot of biblical verses and a lot of linguistic points, which is pretty fascinating as well.
Yeah, like really deep into the actual words and how they're translated and stuff.
Right, exactly.
So where would you say is a good place to start with this? Like, where do they start in the video?
So the video starts from a Quranic perspective. They start by citing a verse from the Quran from chapter 4.
Okay.
And in this verse, God is saying that he guided Muhammad, just as he guided Noah and Abraham and Jesus and other prophets.
Mm-hmm.
So he's saying that, God guided all these prophets. And it's interesting because right after that, they say that there are many Christians and Jews who do not consider or accept Muhammad to be a prophet, and they don't consider the Quran to be their religious authority.
Right.
But they're still bringing the Quran into it as a starting point.
Yeah. So they're acknowledging that difference, but they're going to move on and try to make their point from there.
Right, exactly. And the way they do that is that they start talking about the Song of Solomon.
Right, the Song of Solomon. And that's in the Old Testament.
In the Old Testament, right. And for anyone who doesn't know, the Song of Solomon is part of a collection called the Five Megillot.
The Five Megillot?
Yeah, in Hebrew. And it's in the Hebrew Bible. It's often called the Old Testament. And it's a book that talks about...
like a special figure, like a main person?
Yeah, kind of a mystery man.
Okay.
So Jews often interpret that to be King Solomon himself.
Okay.
And Christians interpret that to be often an allegory to Jesus.
Right.
What's interesting about the Song of Solomon is that it's the speaker who's describing this mystery man.
Right.
Uses feminine grammatical forms. So the person speaking is like a woman.
Okay.
So if we were to take the traditional Jewish understanding of the book, one of Solomon's wives is talking about him.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so she's describing him.
Got it.
And they get to this point where they're talking about chapter 5, verse 16.
Okay.
Which is the last verse of that chapter.
Right.
And in the English translation, it says, he is altogether lovely.
Okay.
At the end of the verse.
Okay.
Now, the video then takes us to scripturetext.com.
Okay.
And shows us the Hebrew letters. Because the Hebrew text was originally written without any vowels.
Right.
And the vowels were added in around the 8th century. So they're saying that if you read the original Hebrew letters without the vowels, you can read it as Muhammad. So the actual spelling is Memhe Mem Dalaya.
Okay.
And they give another reading, Mahud. But then they quickly just switch to Muhammad to kind of support that. They go to Ben Yehuda's Hebrew English Dictionary.
Okay.
And Ben Yehuda was someone who revived the Hebrew language.
Right.
And he made the Hebrew English Dictionary. And they're saying that his dictionary shows that this spelling can be pronounced Muhammad and not Mehmed, which is another name that, has the same letters, but just different vowels.
Gotcha.
So they're saying that in this ancient Hebrew, without the vowels, this could be read as Muhammad.
Yeah.
And they further try to show this by playing an audio clip of a rabbi reading from a Jewish website.
Okay.
He's reading from Song of Songs 5:16. And they point out that he appears to use the im when pronouncing this word.
Okay.
So it sounds like he's saying Muhammad im, which they say is a plural of respect.
Gotcha.
But im in Hebrew is just a plural. So it's not necessarily a plural of respect. It just denotes plurality. But they're saying that it appears, he says, Muhammad.
Gotcha. So they take that and then they move on to something else.
But what they do is they take this word from the same Jewish website.
Yeah.
And they put it into SDL and World Lingo.
Okay.
These are online translation tools.
Right.
And when they put it into those online tools, they get the output Muhammad and not the actual translation of the phrase,
Okay.
which is something like the praise and the lovely one.
Okay.
So they're saying that the online tools are spitting out Muhammad instead of the translation.
So they're saying that that's proof somehow.
They're taking that as evidence or support for their claim.
Okay.
And they're saying that names should not be translated.
Right.
You know, someone's name is John.
Uh-huh.
You don't translate John into Arabic to see what it means.
Right.
You keep it John. So they're saying that these letters spell Muhammad in the Hebrew. So it should be kept as that.
So they're really going deep into the language here.
Yeah, they're really getting deep into the linguistic side of it.
Interesting. So from there, where do they go? Like, how do they move on from that point?
From there, they move on to a more personal anecdote.
Okay.
They talk about how the video creator was at Speaker's Corner, and he would meet this Jewish rabbi, and he would have conversations with him over a number of years.
Right.
And then eventually, he invited this rabbi to Islam
Okay.
because he says that this rabbi, during their conversations, was saying that Muhammad was a prophet.
Right.
But the rabbi's response was that Jewish people don't change their religion.
Right.
He even said, we don't even follow Moses.
Yeah.
Like completely. So, and then he adds that we don't follow a prophet from another tribe or another people.
Yeah. Right.
So it's interesting because it shows you that there's a strong sense of cultural identity when it comes to religion.
Right. It's not just the ideas, but it's the who and the where.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, that's one of the things they mentioned in the video.
Okay. So then they talk about another rabbi.
They talk about another rabbi who quotes a passage, and he says that this passage from the Bible is evidence that he knows Muhammad is a prophet.
Okay.
And then the video goes into a series of verses, which they say is the rabbi quoting the Quran.
Okay.
And the verses are about God giving his favor upon the children of Israel.
Right.
And that they should be careful of breaking the covenants.
Right.
And they should believe in what confirms their scriptures, which is the Torah and the Gospels.
Right.
And to not be the first to disbelieve and to not conceal the truth.
Right.
And it also talks about messengers coming after Moses and that Jesus was given clear proofs.
Right.
And that some people become arrogant.
Right.
And they reject messengers who don't align with what they want.
Yeah, like their own opinions and things.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then they mention a verse about the scripture that confirms what they already have.
Right.
And how they used to ask for a signal crime over those who disbelieved, and that they disbelieved the truth even though they already knew it.
Right.
And that the curse fell upon them even though they already knew.
Right.
And then they get to a verse about Jesus saying in the Quran that he's a messenger, confirming the Torah and giving good tidings of a messenger whose name is the praised one.
Which is Muhammad.
Which is Muhammad. And then it says that they say this is mere magic.
Right.
So it's like asking them, why are you disbelieving? Why are you concealing the truth?
Right.
And that those who were given the scripture know this revelation.
Right.
Like they know their own sons, but some of them conceal the truth while they know. And then it talks about how the messenger came to expound upon what was hidden and to forgive much of what they did.
Right.
And that the light has come to them and a plain scripture.
Right.
And that Muhammad was sent as a mercy to all the peoples, and that he was inspired that their God is one God.
Right.
Will they not then surrender?
So in a way, they're trying to show all these things from the Quran that are confirming things that are in the Bible already.
Right, exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
and saying that that's proof somehow.
Yeah, this is part of their argument. And then they go on to talk about some of the qualities of the Prophet Muhammad as they understand them.
Right.
They say that he was a mercy to all mankind, that God gave him a great favor,
Right.
that he was sent with an irrefutable truth,
Right.
that he dealt gently with all people,
Right.
that he never hit anyone,
Right.
that he's the best example to follow, that he's the last prophet of mankind,
Right.
and that he was sent to all mankind and the jinn,
Right.
and that he was victorious over all systems,
Okay.
and that he was created on an exalted standard,
Okay.
and that he never drank alcohol or used intoxicants, that he never committed fornication or adultery,
Yeah.
and that he never looked upon any woman with lust.
Right. So they're saying all these things are part of his character.
Yeah. These are all part of his character.
Right. And they don't just stop there, right?
They don't just stop there. They go on to give examples.
Okay.
They say that he would feed the poor.
Right.
He would visit the sick.
Okay.
He would discharge the army.
Right.
He was a statesman. He was an arbiter. He would sew his clothes. He would wash his house.
Right.
He would go shopping.
Right.
He would pray for long periods at night. He would fight battles.
Right.
He would give rulings.
Right.
He would explain the Quran. He would instruct people. So you can see a variety of things.
Yeah. So they're showing that he was this really well-rounded person.
Exactly.
And that he was very exemplary.
Right. They even go on to say, have you heard of such a man?
Right.
Have you ever seen such a man?
Right.
Have you ever read about such a man?
Right. So they're making it very personal for you.
Yeah, they're trying to make it a very personal thing.
Yeah.
We're trying to connect with the viewer
Right.
on that level.
Right. Right. And it's powerful because a lot of people are searching for that.
Yeah.
That perfect example or something.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So to tie all this up, what would you say are the main takeaways?
Well, the main takeaways from the video are this proposed linguistic link in Song of Solomon chapter 5, verse 16,
Right.
where it says, altogether lovely in English. They're saying that the Hebrew could actually be read as Muhammad.
Right.
And they kind of support that with the online translation tools
Right.
and with the rabbi's pronunciation.
And those anecdotes from the rabbis as well?
And the anecdotes of the rabbis where they're saying,
Right.
you know, this rabbi is acknowledging Muhammad as a prophet.
Right.
And the other rabbi is saying that, you know, we already know
Right.
he's a prophet based on the Bible.
Right.
So they're taking all this as evidence or support that there may be a reference
Right.
to the prophet Muhammad in the Bible.
Gotcha. So they're trying to find this link between these two different faiths.
Right. They're trying to bridge that gap between those two faiths.
And they're trying to say that maybe they're not as different.
Right. And I think that's what's fascinating about this.
Yeah.
You know, if we were to say that there's a possibility that there is a reference
Right.
to the prophet Muhammad in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
that would change the way we look at these two
Yeah.
religions completely
Yes.
and the way that we interact with each other.
Yeah, and it would make you wonder if other religions have things in common
Right.
that maybe we just haven't discovered yet.
Exactly.
So to leave everybody with something to think about, how should we approach these types of claims when we see them?
Well, I think we should approach them very carefully.
Okay.
There's a lot of complexity,
Right.
you know, with language and translation
Right.
and the fact that these religions have been around for centuries
Right.
and there's so many interpretations.
Right.
So we should approach it carefully and do our own research.
Yeah, go back to the sources.
Right? Go back to the sources.
Don't just take someone's word for it. Especially something as big as this.
Especially something as big as this. Yeah.
Yeah, so be critical of what you're seeing.
Yeah.
Think about it carefully and
Right.
come to your own conclusions.
Exactly.
That's good advice.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, well, thanks for breaking that down with us.
Of course.
That was a really fascinating video.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we'll definitely be thinking about this more
Yeah.
in the future.
Definitely.
All right, thanks.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.